بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Recently someone had asked about get this mic. I'jaz al-Quran, what makes the Quran something, why should I believe that it's the word of Allah? And originally on these live streams we read from the book The Etiquettes of Seclusion, the Etiquettes of Companionship. But this question is far more important. The question of why should a person believe in the Quran? Why should I believe in the Quran? Why should I consider it to be something that is actually the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And first of all, the ulama have written extensively about this, and they call it i'jaz al-Quran, which means that which renders the challenger of the Quran to be sort of handcuffed, to be incapable. And so therefore, there has to be actually a challenge first. A person has to challenge the Quran first. Okay? And the opposite. The person has to challenge the disbeliever first, before giving i'jaz. So in order to prove someone incapable, you have to actually first challenge them. And not only that, you have to challenge them in something that they're good at, something that they're excelled at. So in the time of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, what were they good at? They were good at sihr. They were good at magic. In the time of Sayyidina Isa, they were good at medicine. Okay? So in each time, the Prophet came with something that handcuffs them in what they're good at. There's no point in challenging someone in what they're not good at. So you're not going to come to a philosopher and say, I'll challenge you to a game of basketball. Right? And you're not going to come to a football player and say, I'll challenge you to a game of chess. So you have to challenge them at what they're good at. And what the people of Musa alayhi salam were good at was sihr. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Musa alayhi salam something greater than that. Okay? And he had his stick turn into a serpent and eat their stick. Okay? Or whatever their serpents were. So Musa alayhi salam came with nine miracles that halted, that bewildered the magicians at his time. Okay? And then you have time of Sayyidina Isa bin Maryam. And we have with Sayyidina Isa bin Maryam, you have him curing people. You have him curing all sorts of diseases, all diseases except death. He cured blindness, he cured leprosy, because medicine at the time was what they were good at and what they were good at doing. Now what is that the Arabs were good at the time? What were the Arabs? The Arabs were specialists in in language. Okay, Arabs were specialists in language. So the i'jaz of the Quran came with, bring us a verse that is similar to this. The first challenge was, bring us a surah, a book that is like this book. Then the i'jaz was lowered to bring us a verse that was like this verse. Then it was lowered to bring us even a word. Okay, or 10 surahs. It decreased slowly. The book, then 10 surahs, then finally one ayah. So what is the i'jaz of in terms of these verses? What is it so special about these verses? One way to look at it is that the Quran, the amount of guidance that people receive from the Quran is extremely diverse, that no other book can mimic. So in this sense, what kind of guidance do Muslims get from it? We get guidance on, number one, obviously, our deen. Okay? But from our deen, it's not just the matters of the heart. Unlike other religions, which solely focus on issues of the heart, from the Quran, we get our contractual rulings. All our rulings related to law and finance. We get from the Quran all our rulings related to marriage and divorce. Get from the Quran all of our rulings related to war. How do we go to war? How do we not go to war? Peace treaties. We get these rulings. Treatment of children and parents. Family. Okay? We get rulings on food from the Quran. So not just the matters of the heart, but the matters of the world. And the Western conception of religion oftentimes is that religion is really just for the heart. Okay, religion isn't really supposed to be something for the Religion is not meant to be something for this world. It's merely just things that relate to the heart only. Okay? So that's the one thing. Another thing is the past and the future. So from the Quran, we get things about the past. From the things of the past that the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't have known, which is the historical features. One of the examples is Haman, the minister of Fir'aun. Okay? He's mentioned in the Quran 6 times. And this Haman is not mentioned in the Bible. But rather, another Haman is mentioned in the Bible. So there's 2 Hamans. Okay? There's 2 Hamans. One of them worked on the Tower of Babel way before the time of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Okay? So early critics actually assumed that the Prophet copied the Bible and then made a mistake and quoted the wrong Haman. Okay? So quoted the Haman of Babel, okay, thinking that it's the Haman of Fir'aun. But rather, Haman, which is well known in the Quran 6 times, it talks about the chief minister, sort of engineer of Fir'aun, which is Haman. So only in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, the Egyptologists discovered that Haman was actually another character, which was in fact the minister of Fir'aun in the time of Musa alayhi salam. So this is just one example of the Quran bringing us something from the past, all right, that we had no knowledge of. And even at the time, the Prophet ﷺ could not have figured that out. The hieroglyphics was a language that died for millennia before it was revived in the 1900s. And we get from the book all sorts of other matters about our past, the origins of the human being. Okay? And we get from it that which has to do with the future. Okay? All of these matters that come in the future. From one of them is that eventually a land for the children of Israel would be established. وَقُلْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ أُسْكُنُوا الْأَرْضِ فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ جِئْنَا بِكُمْ لَفِيفًا. Surah Al-Isra tells us, guarantees to us, there will come a day that the Bani Israel all gather and all come together and reside in one land. All right, and جِئْنَا بِكُمْ لَفِيفًا. The word lafif means from all different directions. All right, which means that they would be dispersed first. That they would be dispersed all throughout the world, and they would all come into one land. And that, in fact, is actually one of the sign of the beginning of Akhir al-Zaman, which says, فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ. When the promise of Akhir al-Zaman comes, جِئْنَا بِكُمْ لَفِيفًا. So it's one of the signs that the Akhir al-Zaman has come. Another one is the preservation of Fir'aun's body. That the Quran tells us that in the future, the body of Fir'aun will be resurrected and will be a sign for human beings to contemplate and reflect on. فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ عَنْ آيَاتِنَا لَغَافِلُونَ. All right, today we will preserve you with your body. So something that, how would the Prophet have known this? Or how would the Prophet have known that the body of Fir'aun will not be eaten up and disintegrated like every other body? If you take a human body and put it in the sea, the fish will eat it up or what have you, or it would just dissolve as anything else dissolves. That's biodegradable. However, Fir'aun's body was preserved. And in fact, this is in Surah Yunus. And in fact, in the Cairo Museum, Ramses II is now on display. All right, it was discovered in the 19th century. Okay, it washed up ashore, and it was in fact preserved. All right, it was in fact preserved. Okay. Also, something else that we see daily that is in the future that's mentioned to us in the Quran, that فَلَا يُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ, that a promise from Allah that the human being will find a way to alter the creation. Right? That the human being will find a way to alter the creation. A prophecy for the Arabs that they would no longer use their camels. وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. When pregnant camels, when camels are no longer in use. When a pregnancy of a camel is no longer anything to be looked forward to, the camel has lost its value. And this is true. The camel itself, of course, relative to animals, it's lost its value. But the idea of the Arab needing a camel to travel, right, is no longer, it's completely redundant. Okay? وَإِذَا الصُّحُفُ نُشِرَتْ. right? From one of the ayahs of the Quran, وَإِذَا الصُّحُفُ نُشِرَتْ, which means, has a meaning for the akhirah, and also has a meaning in this life. When pages, right, with writing on it, is spread around. And today, right, at least in the recent past, newspapers, right, have been all over, books, the written word is all over the place. The written word has never been more widespread than today. It's one of the prophecies of Sayyid al-Kawnayn, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that the written word would just spread. Intisharul qalam, right, al-qalam, that the written word is just all over the place, which is true. So we look for the Quran as, we said earlier, as matters of the heart, but matters of life as well. We look for it as matters of the past and matters of the future. And from the matters of the future, everything about the akhirah. The religion of Islam, you'll find no people resisting modernity and the onslaught of atheism and disbelief more than, firstly, there are from the Jews resisting, and there are Catholics resisting, and Protestant resisting, right? And that's a resistance that, we root for them. The resistance against the modern atheist world. But you'll find the greatest of resistance, I believe, just by observation, being amongst the Muslim people, right? Being amongst the Muslims. Firstly, their numbers are vaster, right, than any one of these three by themselves. So Jews by themselves, Protestant by themselves, Catholic by themselves. That's one thing. But the resistance is extremely strong. And one of the forces behind this resistance is what Allah is promising us. And it's not just a fuzzy picture of heaven or a fuzzy picture of hell. It's an extremely detailed picture of paradise and an extremely detailed image of hell. And more detailed probably than any other book. All right? We have more details about what's awaiting a mu'min in paradise and what's awaiting a kafir and a munafiq in hellfire, and also the asfi, the sinner, the grave sinner in Islam is threatened, which Allah doesn't have to, He can forgive his threats, right? He's threatened with some touch of the fire before entering Jannah. That's for the mu'min, all right, who is a asi, who his sicknesses in this life and his trials in the grave, his punishment in the grave, and the Yawm al-Qiyamah, none of that was able to wash away his sins. So he's actually threatened that he may be put into the hellfire for a period of time and then removed out from it. So the details of afterlife in the Quran are more pointed than any other details, than any other scripture. Furthermore, the description of God Himself, the description of Allah Himself, Azza wa Jal, is, we are unaware of how detailed and how comforting is the description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran as compared to other scriptures. All right? Amongst them is that we know that He is not created and has no end, and that He is completely munazzah, free from all physicality. And if you notice that whenever the Judeo-Christian example of God is given, it's always like a guy sitting up in the sky, right? And anyone who has that conception has the right to disbelieve in that God. And we have such a rise in atheism that happened some centuries back, mainly because of this. Mainly because of this idea that the definition of God hasn't been clear enough, right, in their scriptures, that it's a complete anthropomorphic definition of God. And furthermore, when you read their books, you realize this God goes from extremely wrathful, right, to now all of a sudden you turn the other cheek and get slapped and sacrificing His son for us, right? So it's like confusing. You get whiplashed. And this is why anyone who reads the previous scriptures is going to say, this is a moody God, extremely moody. On one hand, the Bani Israel, He is just all on their backs. The law, and if you don't do this, and you don't do that, and what happened to the Pharaoh, and it's extremely rigid, okay, to the great detail of what the type of law that they have. In contrast, you go to the New Testament, and you find all of a sudden, there's a change of face, a complete about face, right? So a person gets whiplash studying this example of God, right? And Muslims haven't realized that just simply, the simple definitions of God in Surah Al-Ikhlas, right? قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ negates 5 types of kufr, right? 5 that are all found in previous books. One of them, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, is there's none like unto Him. It negates that God can enter inside of anyone. It negates the idea that God can enter into someone and enter into this world, all right? Which is the negation of the idea of Christ being God, or even being Son of God. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. Neither was He brought into the world, nor outside of the world. That being, he brought all the causes of the world into existence. So his definition is the bringer, the one who brought this world into existence, that himself had no cause, that he himself had no cause. Right? So everything besides God has a cause, except God himself being the causer of all causes. All right? And this itself sort of lightens the idea of a miracle for a mu'min. For a Muslim, the idea of a miracle is really not so much of a big deal, because we know the idea of cause and effect itself is a creation. The idea that everything has to have a cause, that system itself is a creation. Right? It came from kun fayakun. And all over the Quran you see kun fayakun, be and it is. Right? Meaning that one of the ways that Allah creates is simply He says be, and a thing is brought into creation. Okay? The whole concept of cause and effect was also something that Allah said be, kun, and it came into creation. So for a mu'min, the idea that Isa bin Maryam was born without a father, Prophet Adam alayhi salam was created without a mother or a father, Sayyidah Hawa was created from the rib of Adam without a mother, that the idea that the first descendants of Sayyidina Adam would marry one another as siblings, right? But that wasn't something that harmed them. But today it harms us. Okay, so they couldn't marry their twin, but they could marry the other sibling. And to be told, well, at that time, the way the human being was made up, it didn't harm them. Well, today it harms you, right? All right, you get all sorts of defects. Okay, so and besides that, Allah created within the human being a disgust for it. So all of this khalq is easy for a moment to understand, because from the beginning, the whole concept of cause and effect, right? أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ, the cause and effect is a creation to begin with, right? So these definitions of Allah Azza wa Jal, at the verse أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ, verily He has the khalq and the amr. What is the khalq? The khalq is the creation through cause and effect. And likewise Allah says the creation of the human being is just like one creation. All right? So He says kun fayakun to Adam alayhi salam and creates Sayyidah Hawa, and from them they recreate themselves with His permission. So al-khalq is the cause and effect, the creation through cause and effect. Wal-amr is the creation by kun fayakun. Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam was created by al-amr, kun fayakun. Likewise Sayyidah Hawa. Sayyidina Isa bin Maryam was partially, just the beginning, the seed was created by kun fayakun. Where did that seed come from? Nowhere, no sabab, no asbab at all. Okay. Likewise, when physicists, they try to tell us, all right, we're going back eons of time to the first moment, all right, of existence. Well, they still haven't answered. No matter how small and how far back, you still have to answer the same question. Where did it come from? All right, where is that first moment coming from? Where is that first force coming from? Where is that first nanoparticle of matter, or whatever, however small they're getting? Okay, where did it come from? So for us, it is almost irrelevant. It's a cute little fact for physicists to try to go all the way back, eons of time, and find some small tiny particle or whatever they're calling it these days. For us, it's all irrelevant, because you need to answer the same question. Well, where did that come from? And where did its force come from? All right? So for the mu'min, the understanding of God is extremely vast and deep. Okay? Nor does he nod off or get overtaken by sleep. All of this khalq, if it were to disappear in a second, none of Allah's mulk would be decreased, not an iota. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if every single one of you came and stood before me and stood on one plane, and everyone from the ins and jinn asked for every last thing that they desired, and Allah gave it to them, it wouldn't decrease from His mulk, not a single iota. All right. So all of this khalq that we see, from the smallest sizes to the largest sizes, is to Allah Azza wa Jal equal, because for Allah Azza wa Jal, He is no physicality to begin with. There's no small and there's no big. Small and big are for us. Right? So this description of God, if anyone hasn't read it, one of the descriptions of His knowledge states that there is not a single leaf that falls except that He knows that it fell. And there is not a single grain or seed that is in the earth except that He knows where it is on the earth, all right, in the depth of the darkness, and the Quran says, and also whether it is moist or dry. Right? I mean, look at the detail that it gives us. Okay. Furthermore, we understand what is not God. It is not for a human being that Allah would speak to him except through angelic inspiration, or from behind a veil, or he will send him a messenger. So all of the charlatans that claim to have seen God, or claim that they are God themselves, any mu'min knows that as long as you're living in this life, Allah will never take a human form, never take any form, and you will never see him with your naked eye. Right? And this is something that we should keep in mind regarding the Dajjal. And there are many preachers now that they are actually preaching that Dajjal isn't a doctrine in Islam, that Imam Mahdi is not a doctrine in Islam, that the return of Prophet Isa is not a doctrine in Islam, right? And someone told me once that Mufti Abu Layth said this, and I'm like, no way, there's no way he'd be total quack if he said something like that. I mean, no Sunni Muslim who studied any modicum of Aqidah at all, or opened Sahih Muslim or Sahih Bukhari, or any book of Hadith, and went to the end of the book and read the Alamat al-Sa'ah, okay, or any tafsir about that touches upon Alamat al-Sa'ah, it will tell you that there is Imam Mahdi, there is Sayyidina Isa, there is the Dajjal, and there is Sayyidina Isa bin Maryam, and then you have Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, and then you have all the other signs which the order is unknown, but they're all going to come in Akhiruz Zaman. And to say that there's no Akhiruz Zaman, right, and that there is no concept of Mahdi, I didn't see it, because I don't really follow people on, I mean, not that I don't want to follow people online, but I just never happened to follow Mufti Abu Layth's commentary. But there's no way he could possibly say that, especially with a Mufti title, having studied with the Deobandis in Pakistan, right, who are just Sunni Muslims. So, pretty bizarre for someone to say that. Anyone who would say that, you would be deemed a quack, right? You'd be never listened to again. So the idea of the Dajjal comes and fools people to think that he's God, all right? That he's God. Well, for a Muslim, it's pretty simple, right? We know from Surah Al-Ikhlas, لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. There's nothing could be similar to him. There is no ittihad will ever happen. Neither can Allah Azza wa Jal take out, does he have any forms of the creation, which needs limitation to time, space, physicality, nor does Allah Azza wa Jal's essence come into a makhluk. His essence does not enter into a makhluk. It's called ittihad, which is the whole idea behind God, the Christ being Christ, or Son of God, and at the same time. So this idea a Muslim will be completely free from. Another idea, or part of the ijaz of the Quran, is its preservation. Now, some people ask the simple question: you Muslims say that the Quran is as it is, compiled as is, right, and hasn't changed. What's your proof, right? In this case, there's a concept in law called the presumption of law, which means that if I make a statement, the statement stands until you prove otherwise. So if I tell you who I am, right? Okay, if I tell you who I am or where I am, right, that stands until you prove otherwise. Okay? If I tell you I'm in New Jersey, it stands until you could somehow trace my IP address and prove that I'm in somewhere, some other state. So likewise, when we're bringing you the copy of the Quran and we're claiming and saying this is the original copy, besides that we have asanid, we have chains of transmission that are mutawatir, that are over thousands of chains. Any hafiz of Quran can tell you that there are not hundreds, thousands of asanid on the Quran. So it's the presumption of law, and it's up for the doubter to show us where's the other copy, right? Where is any other version of the book? Because you can go and get the different Bibles, and we know Ahmad Didat back in the 70s and 80s did that really well, and he was pretty entertaining. He was like the Muhammad Ali of Dawah, because he was funny, right? And he really roasted his opponents. You got to watch Ahmad Didat's videos in the past, because he really used to, may Allah give him Jannah, he really used to take on his opponents and dice them up. And I don't think there's a single instance in which he was ever left confounded or without anything or without any response to any of his opponents. Okay, so the preservation of the Quran, besides all that the content that it's used for, it's preservation. Now, furthermore, it's a book that's used as medicine. It's a book that's recited. It's a book that is memorized. So it's preserved. It's used as medicine. It's recited on a regular basis. People recite it. It's easy to memorize, and there's no other book on the earth, I don't think, that's memorized at all. Even I was once working in a Christian-based school, and the dean said that we were told in our youth to memorize the table of contents of the Bible. That if you're studying the Bible, that at least this is like one of their schools that trains religious people. That they were told to memorize the table of contents of the Bible. That's it. Just the names of the books. And she refused. She said, well, what's a waste of time? Why should I? It's written right there. Right? And she rebelled, and this was her act of rebellion. First of all, the idea that you would rebel against your teacher, that's a whole nother story. Right? You're not going to ever find a story of an alim who talked about how he rebelled, right, against his teacher. His teacher said, go memorize this, and he said no. Right? Firstly, that's the first thing. Secondly, I mean, they wouldn't even memorize the table of contents, let alone the actual book itself. Okay? So preservation is one thing. Memorization is a whole other thing. Daily use, recitation, is a third thing. And anyone who's listened to the Quran, right, you're going to have to admit there's no sound like it. Right? There's no Arab poetry. There's no other liturgical work similar to it in its effect on people. Okay? And lastly, all the other things that we mentioned, this in a nutshell, right? How we use the book, its preservation, right? Its description of God, its function as guidance for worldly things, let alone spiritual things. All right? It's being used as a medicine. It's being something that's daily recited, memorization, preservation. So that's a very quick, short lecture there on the nature of i'jaz of Quran. So I think we'll stop here. And anyone who wants to pitch in or give any, you can add something that you want. If you want, pitch in or bring in any questions that you may have, we could take that now. Yeah, you could take questions pertaining to this topic, and I guess if you want to move beyond it, it's pretty open-ended. These live streams are pretty open-ended, so you can move beyond that if you want. All right, first question. How is it that so many self-proclaimed Muslims will be misled by the Dajjal? The first answer to this is that they separate between divine ordinances, divine commands related to religion, private life, and public life. They separate between the two. And one of the isharat of that is from Surah Al-Jinn. In Surah Al-Jinn, we were told that the jinn were in an unknown situation. They didn't have guidance. The message was old, right? They were unsure about even the books that they had, and they were waiting for the truth to come down. Certain good jinn. And these jinns described themselves as that they believed أن لن نعجز الله في الأرض ولن نعجزه هربا. One of the verses that Allah reveals about them, that is the reason for their guidance, is the saying that we said لن نعجز الله في الأرض ولن نعجزه هربا. You'll not escape Allah Azza wa Jal, not in the afterlife, not in this life. Right? You will not escape God in this life nor in the afterlife. So one of the ways that a Muslim should always avoid pitfalls of Dajjal is, the first major pitfall is the privatization of religion. that religion outside this world, do what you need, all right? Or outside your private self, accommodate everything. Do what you have to do, right? However, keep your religion privatized to yourself, all right? Keep it to yourself, right? And what we say is we aren't going around sort of knocking on doors and seeing everyone in the supermarket and telling them what the truth is. But what I mean by this is in our workplace, we make sure that we're not doing something haram in our workplaces, that we don't justify doing something haram for some material gain, that we don't support, neither as government legislation, nor otherwise, nor in businesses, nor in any other capacity, that which Allah prohibited, neither for political gain or otherwise. So basically, the first pitfall that a person should avoid is the privatization of their religion, all right? And to start speaking about our theology and our deen as something in history. Like, well, the Muslim scholars said this or that. Well, no, the way we should speak about deen is, this is what the reality is, all right? And once they start separating between you and the expression of deen as a reality, we have a problem, all right? Once we start speaking about deen as something that, well, this is what they said it is. It's as if you're saying, I'm really not sure, right? This is what they said it is. And the doubt starts creeping in, all right? So the first thing, advice to give for myself and others is to be aware of the increasing privatization of religion, the secularization of Muslim life. That you might see someone praying 5 times a day and fasting the whole month of Ramadan, and even reading Quran and doing all sorts of Islamic stuff. But once it comes to matters of the workplace or anything related to the public, he'll separate between the two. I would rather a Muslim say, this is the truth, I'm weak. All right? This is the haqq. All right? This is the reality of Islam. It's just I'm the one who's weak. All right? So that's one thing that I could say, and very important point here on how is it and why is it that a seemingly pious practicing Muslims would end up becoming misled by the Dajjal. Right? Said man says, any recommended titles to read up on the Alamat As-Sa'at in English? Well, the most basic one is Ibn Kathir's short summary, and it has more than you need to know about the signs of Akhiruz Zaman. And that short Ibn Kathir is the signs before the Day of Judgment. That's one of the simplest, most basic listing of hadiths about the signs of before the Day of Judgment. And one of the signs before the Day of Judgment is that people will stop warning about the Dajjal and on the minbar. So when they give the khutbah, they won't warn about Masih al-Dajjal. And obviously by mafhumul awla, right, there's a sign of Day of Judgment that people are telling you that Dajjal doesn't exist. And Muslim scholars telling you that Dajjal doesn't exist. To me, it's actually unbelievable, right? Unbelievable that someone would say that. And as soon as any Muslim would say that, scholar, in every discipline there are quacks. There are people who say things that are so far off that it's that the scholars in the field deem them to be a quack, right? And anyone who says that Dajjal and Sayyidina Isa and the Imam Mahdi is not part of doctrine, really, it's an absurdity. Nico says Nico says, where'd he go? Oh, is Allah everywhere with His knowledge? Yes, He is everywhere with His knowledge, with the attribute of knowledge. All right, next question is, what type of arguments do Orientalists bring in regards to the Quran, refuting the revelation of the Quran in all of the qira'at? The Orientalists, in regards to refuting the revelation of the Quran in its qira'at, oftentimes say that the Quran is borrowed tales, right? And what they actually say about the qira'at themselves, I would have to actually refresh my memory because I haven't picked up an Orientalist article for a long time. Okay, so I would have to refresh myself. But they do all basically tell us that the The revelations are compiled stories from the different Arab tribes, and that's what accounts for the different dialects. Okay. Riz Ramzan says, do we have a list of the 30 Dajjals? Musaylim al-Kadhab, Abdullah bin Saba, Mirza Ghulam the Liar, Elijah Muhammad. I don't know if we have a full list, but their Dajjals are not restricted to 30. There could be smaller ones. Okay. Are the names of the surah part of the Quran? Very good question. And the names of the chapters were given by the Prophet himself, by Sayyidina Jibreel, and some of them are unknown, so we assume that they were given by the Sahaba themselves. The names. So sometimes the Prophet named, for example, Al-Fatiha, Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, An-Nisa. The Prophet ﷺ gave those names. The later surahs, he used to refer to them by the beginning of the few words. So the Salaf, the early Muslims, just took one of the words there and gave it. Like, for example, the Prophet referred to Surah Idha Zulzilat. So in that case, the Sahaba, they gave the word Surah Al-Zalzala. Okay? And it's unknown whether it was Sahaba or Salaf. So some of them were given by the Prophet and some were given by the first 3 generations. All right, Sheikh Ahmed Saad has translated An-Nukhba Sughra. Yeah, An-Nukhba Sughra. Yeah, that's a good book. Ali, could you put the link? Could you get the link and put that in a post? Thank you. All right, this question is on women leading a nation. I don't know the exact hadith, but what is the context in this regard? This is why fiqh is so important, because when you take one hadith, you not understand the vast breadth of the hadith, or recognize that some hadith are actually solitary, and therefore the early fuqaha didn't really rule by them. So this is one of them. That the hadith that states that no ummah will have success that is led by a woman is said by the early scholars, including Imam Abu Hanifa, that it is specific to the circumstance of the Persians who were collapsing and their leaders were dying one after the other until a little girl became the queen. And that Prophet ﷺ was referencing that nation, okay? And it was a mubalagha, okay? But the ruling on women ruling in any capacity is that the only thing that they cannot rule is being a khalifa and to be judge in any case that involves a had punishment, that involves a severe punishment. Okay, so in those cases she cannot serve as judge. What is the reason for it? Is that we believe and we hold that there are certain divine attributes that Allah loves for women to have, and certain divine attributes that Allah has ordained that men should have. Okay, and rahma and ra'fa, mercy and compassion, are the attributes that Allah wants women to have. Okay, that's what He wants them to be created with and to nourish. All right, and so if they have to issue a judgment and a ruling in which someone's going to have to die, all right, or someone's going to have to lose a great amount of wealth, He, Azza wa Jal, does not want them to undermine, right, and take away from that mercy and compassion by having to do that. And anyone who has to do that, you're going to lose something inside of you. All right, you're going to lose something inside of you, and Allah Azza wa Jal didn't want that to happen. All right, for women, in terms of losing some of that rahmah and compassion. So in that case, those elements of judgeship, okay, and the element only of the khilafah, and mind you, the khilafah is a specific type of rule in which the ruler rules the entire ummah. He has been given the khilafah by the elders of the Muslims, which means that the Muslims are unified to begin with, right? Which hasn't happened in eons, okay? And so the khilafah is something that really hasn't existed for almost 800, 900 years. The Ottomans came close. The closest, we used to call them the Khalifas, and the scholars used to call them the Khulafa, because they came so close, and they were essentially fulfilling the function of a Khalifa. But ultimately, it wasn't a technical Khilafah that with all the rules, that they have to be from Quraysh, and they have to also rule the entire Ummah. Okay, so they didn't rule the entire Ummah, because there were Safavids and there were the Mughal empires. And they were not from Quraysh, right? So those are two things, but other than that, they fulfilled a lot of the functions. So you find the Muslims calling them the Ottoman caliphs, even though technically they weren't. So the ruling of a woman leading anything is much more restricted than people will imagine. And this is why it's extremely important to say, it is extremely, you will end up ruining your understanding of things when you try to open up works of ahadith and just try to understand your fiqh from there. There are so many ahadith, okay, that we have the statements of Sahaba commenting on those ahadith that clarify the matter, okay, that clarify the issue of those ahadith, and that would render the hadith on its face value and the ultimate ruling after you gather all the evidence to be totally different. Okay, it can be completely different. This is why people must study fiqh, and they must take their knowledge from the works of fiqh and from ulama who are fuqaha, because so many times, I can't name you the instances in which certain ahadith are deemed to be either general or to be mubalagha, exaggeration. Like for example, if the hadith of, if a woman or a dog or a mule crosses someone who's praying, his prayer is broken. Right? This hadith is completely mu'awwal. Imam al-Nawawi has a sharh on it, and he gives a page of ta'weed on this hadith and proves to you that it has to be mu'awwal. Mu'awwal means interpreted. That it's not a literal. It's an exaggeration, meaning that for 3 different reasons a person's prayer can be broken. If his wife passes by him or a beautiful woman passes by him, his salah is broken from being distracted. If a dog passes by him, his salah may be broken if he thinks that the dog brought najasa, right? Because dogs urinate everywhere and things like this, okay? Or if his mule passes by him, his salah will be broken because he will fear that his property is lost, right? That his animal is walking away, right? So his focus is broken, not his actual salah, okay? And likewise, so many other ahadith, for example, may the curse of Allah be on women who trim their eyebrows. There is so much speech, discussion about this. Sayyidah Aisha was asked about the commentary on this. The madhahib have complete different opinions on this, okay? On this subject matter. So, this is why, if you want to do yourself a favor, and you want to do your understanding of matters a favor, do not just open works of ahadith and try to get things from yourself. You're going to end up more than confused, okay? And most likely, you'll probably make something more strict than it actually is. Because in a lot of times the Prophet was speaking about certain circumstances, okay, only. And you can only get that in the commentary of the ahadith. Okay. Hamza Aziz says, what's the response to ulama that hold the view that Sayyidina Isa won't return? Number one, multiple sahih ahadith of Sayyidina Isa that he will return on the shoulders of 2 angels, okay, and that he will kill the Dajjal. Multiple such ahadith. Secondly, the Quran, وَيُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا. He will kill people, he will speak to people in from the cradle and in old age. So he hasn't reached old age. وَيُكَلِّمُ النَّاسِ, right? An-nas is plural, means the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if someone wants to interpret that, yes, in the akhirah, well, in the afterlife, there's no old age, number one, right? And secondly, he goes to paradise, so he doesn't talk to all people, he only talks to the mu'mineen at that point. Right? So the ayah of Quran, وَيُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا, he will speak to people in the cradle and old age. Right? وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about him, and there is none from the people of the book except that they will believe in him before his death. Right? So Allah is telling us before his death that this will happen. Have we seen all of the people of the book unifying around him, or the majority of people of the book unifying around Prophet Isa and believing in him? No, right? That hasn't happened. And Allah is speaking before his death. Okay, so he hasn't yet passed away. So again, the issue of the return of Sayyidina Isa and the existence of the Dajjal and the Mahdi, there are so. And I guess we have to do a whole podcast or episode about this, or live stream about that subject to refute the claim that some of these people are making. And I'm telling you, they're telling me that Mufti Abu Layth is saying this. You know, I would have to see that for myself, because me and my friends were talking about it yesterday in class. There's no way someone with any modicum of learning could ultimately tell us that the return of Sayyidina Isa will not occur, and that there is no Dajjal, right? It's impossible. And if it was true that Mufti Abu Layth said that, then well, I don't believe that he would say that. He would have to be completely out of his mind to say that. In any event, let's go on to the next question. Does shaitan have the capability of reading our minds? How limited is he? The shaitan does have capability of inserting ideas in your mind, which is given to us in many hadiths. Number one, the very well-known one, that when a Muslim starts to pray, the shaitan puts ideas in his head, throws ideas in his head. All right, I'm going to have to take the rest of your questions later. I got to run, but jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you all for attending and listening. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم.